So we've talked about systems. We've talked about how they are, they're effectively blueprints and guidelines and reference points for any given aspect of life. We've talked about the different aspects of the systems. There's the technical or the scientific knowledge, and then there is the ability to apply that knowledge in the living moment, the sort of the creative aspect. And then we talked about, obviously, the different interpretations of systems, because every individual, the physiology is slightly different, the psychology is slightly different. Everyone's going to have a slightly different take on their, a given version of a technique, or as I say, a universal truth, because we could be talking about anything here. If we talk about martial art, you can ask 10 instructors to show you how to throw a right cross, and they're all going to basically show you something that mechanically is pretty similar, but they're all going to focus in and zone in on different aspects of that right cross, of what is important, because it's what's important to them. It's what works for them, for their physiology, for their psychology, etc. It's their personal artistic interpretation of that scientific thing that is a right cross, okay? And this is what I love about seminars, going and training with some of the best guys in the world, and you can go into a room and you can be shown a technique that you've been doing very effectively and landing for 20 years, in high pressure, competition scenarios and things like that. And they take that technique and in 5 minutes they show you a different aspect of it. It's exactly the same technique. It is what it always was. It's just they're coming at it from a slightly different angle. The light hits it a different way, metaphorically speaking, and you go, oh my God, I never thought about putting that there. And I love that. That's what I love about learning at the higher level. When you've mastered those basics, you've got that, those fundamentals down, you can really start to explore and have fun and get creative. And that's a really inspirational experience as well, when you have those like eureka moments. That's cool. Now, coming back to teachers, I learned a very, very important lesson, and my mum phrased it beautifully. So what it was I was struggling with my mental health at the time. I was reading volumes of self-help and philosophy and all sorts of stuff, and I read this one book, and there was a certain passage in this book that really, really shook me. It really upset me, and it made me struggle even worse. And I went to my mum and I sort of explained what had happened, and she said something that's never left me. It was brilliant. She said, when you're reading a book, it's also really important that you're reading the person that wrote that book at the same time, because often, we can receive information and it can be valid information. In fact, if it has that kind of effect on you, that kind of, powerful effect, whether it's positive or negative, it's probably because, it's not probably because, it's because something's resonated inside of you, okay? Now, if it's a negative reaction like I had, okay, you can have that knee-jerk reaction and you can kick off and you can fight back against it and blah, blah, blah. Or you can just take a moment and you can stop and you can extract the information, the core of that knowledge or that statement, what is it that is actually being said, and what is it that has caused the emotional response, and usually they're completely and utterly, separate issues. Like I said, every individual, it can be in a positive or a negative manner, but they will put their own stamp. Their own ego is the filter that teaching is coming through. And when people are maybe not brilliantly intentioned, or maybe have some pretty massive fucking personal issues, quite frankly, they can shine through in the delivery, okay? So I went back and I looked at this particular passage, and I took the information out and I looked at it in an objective way, And as I said, paradoxically, the glass is always both half full and half empty. The only true statement is it's half occupied. So this was their delivery. So I simply took a look at that information and I sat with it for a bit, and I found several ways of explaining the information you know, in a manner that worked for me, you know, something that I was comfortable with. At no point in time did I change the facts or the information or anything else like that. It was simply a question of taking out the rather clumsy and egocentric delivery of that information and distilling it. It's a little bit like the process of sieving for gold, you know, taking all the shite at the bottom of the lake and sieving through it and taking out the little gold nuggets, okay? And it's worth doing. It's worth doing. It's worth practicing. So, you know, for any aspect of this life that upsets the hell out of you, there's almost always another way of looking at it that is going to give you some peace and some balance. It's just that we have to be able to control our emotional brain for long enough to let the conscious bit take over and do the work unimpeded, you know, instead of going up like a bottle of pop. And on a personal note, I have a lot of really crap programming internally that's probably never ever going to be put right because it's too deeply ingrained. So what I often have to do, anger is one of them, by the way, so the martial art's been a useful tool for me. But what I have to do is I have to let that emotion come up inside and I have to sit and watch it. And instead of just reacting like a knee-jerk reaction, you know, just let it go, watch it, and then respond as I choose to respond, as opposed to going from that place. I might never be able to fix the fault, as it were. The wiring might be just, you know, a lost cause. But, you know, if I'm aware of it, I don't have to respond from that place. And likewise, you know, with the teaching, if I do sense that the person in front of me has ulterior motives, really, and is coming from a place of egotism, of superiority, of whatever, I'm not going to necessarily throw the information in the bin. I'm going to see what they're saying first. I'll throw them away, you know. I won't go back to that person. I won't go back to those books, etc., etc., etc. But I will work out my own way of rephrasing that information. So if anything hurts me or upsets me, that's on me to find a way around that. And that's like the correct way to approach learning, I would say.